What do you do when the conflicts begin? If we learn what we can do from this end, then we can learn what they can bring to our relationship that will enhance it for us, all right? One, when there is conflict going boom, 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 in-laws, remove yourself from the atmosphere of conflict. Find a place to pray, especially if the conflict has degenerated to a shouting bout. You will find it difficult to leave the environment when you feel that you have not passed all your points across and that you have not succeeded in making the enemy side to see reason. But the very presence of mind to withdraw when you really want to stay and fight to the finish is what heaven honors. This is maturity, denying yourself instant gratification. Not just that, but actually going to God in prayer. Going to God in prayer makes you a definite candidate for some of the weird ideas that come from heaven. Those ideas that bring results beyond what you expect. You may say, well, I've already had the shouting bout and it is over, and I sure did not walk away. Or, at the point of reading this book, I have gone beyond the leaving the room stage. Will I still get the same response from heaven? There are no restricted access hours to the advisory court of heaven. Whatever point at which you acknowledge heaven is the point at which your help will begin. God created us with a deep need for him. But of course, most of us think that we're better off without him and therefore feel that we are our own best help. All right, let me make a slight note here. Feel that we're our own best help. We sometimes get to the lowest ebb before we acknowledge our need for him. This is such a needless tragedy that humans are too proud to reach out to their true source of help when in trouble. But God is ever willing to furnish us with all the resources we need to win our battles. All we need to do is acknowledge him and he will direct our path. The act of praying also serves another purpose. It helps you calm down quickly. Calm down. Mommy, be calming down. Darling, calm down. Husband, calm down. Wife, calm down. Be calming down. Be resting. I'm sure you guys know what I'm referring to. All right? Now, you cannot come into the presence of God and remain angry for long. No. His Spirit, who is the comforter, will gradually dispel your gloom until you are free from your anger or upset. What else can you do? At this point, you need to be careful what you say, either to your spouse or to your in-law or to your extended family member. Do not go by the dictates of your anger and say just anything that comes to you. Words have a way of adhering to memory banks. They are not easily forgotten. They will definitely be used against you in future. When you most probably have forgotten you ever uttered such words, they will come back and bite you. I tell you, in-laws have a knack of scoring cheap points with those very words of yours. So why give them the coffin in which to bury you? Next thing you can do is do a critical analysis of the problem. Be critical of everybody in the case, including yourself, especially you. I found out that we come into marriage with a lot of biases and begin to arm ourselves with defense machineries to counter in-laws long before we have met them or even given them a chance to prove themselves. Ask yourself, where could you have gone wrong? Where could you have done wrong? Point the first accusing finger at yourself. Now, what did I do? Again, it's what I do for this matter, we're no good. When you are able to do that, you can more easily apportion honest blame to others, if any. All right? For most of us, this is almost an impossible thing to do. We think, these in-laws of mine have tried my patience so long. I can never be the one who is wrong. I never did anything in the first place to deserve all the trouble they have caused me. How can I ever have been wrong? You need to realize that 90% of the time when people offend us, they don't mean to. They don't go out of their way to say, let me deliberately vex this person. All right? And our biases make us so defensive that we see offenses most times where there are none. When you honestly appraise the situation, don't be surprised to find out that you have not been behaving right towards your in-laws because you have not forgiven past wrongs they did to you. This in turn aggravates them, especially if they have ever apologized to you. Next, ask yourself if the issue is really strong enough to warrant the attention given to it. Ask yourself, if someone other than an in-law did this same thing to me, will I react the same way? You will discover that some of the things you react so vehemently to, you will tolerate from your own relatives and dismiss it as a mistake. Some of the things we react to are so trivial that it is amazing the giant proportions they assume only because they are colored by the term in-laws. All right? Get your spouse alone and talk about it. These are solutions now. Get your spouse alone and talk about it. Your spouse may be too angry to immediately address the issue. So you may need to give it some time, but don't leave it too long. Third parties have a way of complicating issues between a couple, and so it is important that the problem be tackled with just the two of you in attendance. I cannot help but mention that if you have not cultivated the habit of good communication with each other, this would be difficult to do now in the midst of a crisis. So backtrack, start training yourself on good communication with each other. When you get your spouse alone, please do not be critical of your in-laws or judgmental about them. Don't ever forget that the love your spouse has for you can never replace or do away with the one he or she has for brothers, sisters, mother, father. You cannot replace those loves in your spouse's life. Loving you is an added blessing in your spouse's life. Loving family and spouse is not mutually exclusive. The fact that I love my family does not mean I don't love you. The fact that I love you does not mean I don't love my family. None can or should be given up, and no one should have to be forced into making such a choice. Stick with the issue on ground. Don't dig up offenses of the colonial era. Let it be understood what your offense is without the raising of voices, or else you are going back to the shouting match. Even if your partner begins to lose it, you determine to maintain the peace. It is actually better to stop talking, excuse yourself, and leave the person alone for a while to cool off, and then return to continue the conversation. Consciously remind yourself in the course of talking that what you are having is a civilized conversation, and strive to maintain it at that. Next, you must draw the line on how much in-law interference you will have in your marriage. In other words, set boundaries, set boundaries, set boundaries. If you do not do this, you will continually have problems. You need to decide if you will allow in-laws to live with you and for how long each one can stay. It is generally not healthy to have many in-laws staying in your house. In fact, if you can manage it, better not have any at all. Most times they are the ones that draw your attention to a particular fault in your spouse that you have never noticed before. Love for your spouse will cover or ignore some of their shortcomings, but your family members do not feel the same way about your spouse. So they are apt to not only point them out, but to magnify them. If it is your family members who are causing the problem in the home, then please do not insist that they remain in your home at all costs. You can still help them from wherever you are. They don't have to necessarily live with you for you to be able to do that. You may say that you cannot send your own family members away because your spouse's own family members are also around, and you insist your spouse's people are not troublesome. Okay? Then it is unfair. Well, let me read this again. You may say that you cannot send your own family members away because your spouse's own family members are also around, and your spouse insists that they are not troublesome. Then it is unfair to send them away for the sins of another. Imagine if your own side was the innocent party, being asked to vacate your home because of the offense of the other side. Would you be happy about it? Only Jesus Christ was given that assignment, and he, of course, has successfully accomplished it. Once you marry, there really should be no my family and your family. You all become one family. And after all, what do you call your spouse's family members? Brother-in-law or sister-in-law or mother-in-law or father-in-law, etc. Of course, not all in-laws make trouble, but the general trend is that they do. Next, determine to treat your in-laws with the respect you should give them. They are very much a part of your spouse, and if you really want to make your spouse happy, then you will strive to treat the relatives with respect, whether rich or poor. There has to be a lot of swallowing of your pride if you want to deal with this issue decisively. In most cases, it is the man's relatives that are the issue more than the woman's. So the biggest part should be played by the wife in maintaining peace in the home. Don't stoop to pettiness, like saying your in-laws eat too much, and therefore you start locking the food up and serving very little amounts. Your spouse knows that his people are in the house. In fact, overfeed them. That way you will have no problem. If your spouse has to spend so much more on food, no one will preach a sermon to him on what to do. Let your spouse's family have their time with your spouse. Don't be jealous of the time your spouse spends with their family within reason. Do not be so insecure as to feel that they're either taking your spouse from you or talking about you. The relationship your spouse has with you is very important to him or her, but that is not the only relationship he or she has to have on earth. All right? You are important, but you are not enough. Work on your attitude. Can in-laws be aggravating? Yes. Can they be unkind? Yes. Can they interfere where it is none of their business? Yes. Do you feel like asking God to give you permission to kill them sometimes? Yes. But face it, if you decide within yourself to treat them as you would your own family members, you'll be amazed how much at peace you will be and how much they will hesitate to offend you. This means that if you will not react to your own sister going into the kitchen to dish out her food, then do not react when your spouse does. If you do not complain when your brother drives one of the cars, then you must not do so with your spouse's brother. Of course, there are exceptions to this rule. Some of your in-laws may not be well behaved and therefore cannot be trusted to take care of certain assets. Don't be so intent on defending your family members that you shut out your spouse. Put aside your defensive words and pay attention to what he or she is saying. You are an adult and should therefore be able to make certain deductions for yourself. If your spouse exaggerates the faults of your family members, you can tell if there are a few embellishments here or there. Realize that everybody will always tell their own side so that they appear to be the victim, including yourself. But you will also get to hear the truth in between the lines, and you need the truth to be able to truly deal with the issue. Don't take sides with your family without giving your spouse a chance to defend his or herself. It often happens that when there has been a fracas, the family member quickly goes before the spouse to relay the matter, usually painting the other spouse a devil. You will be very foolish to act on just what one side tells you. Listen to your spouse and together tackle the problem. If there are any corrections to be done, it is easier for you to handle your family yourself so that they do not feel slighted before your spouse. But please, do not correct your spouse in front of your family members either. Where the family members are young and more or less like children to you, then no matter whose side they are from, you and your spouse must correct them together. They must know that you present a common front at all times. And that brings me to a very critical portion of how we allow extended family influence in our marriages. What was the last thing I read? Let me read it again so that I do not quote myself wrong. It says boom, 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 boom. Where is that? Okay. They must know that you present a common front at all times. Let me read something to you. I saw it somewhere and it struck me. It says, where is that? It says, if your in-laws sense a split between you and your partner, they will triangulate, meaning they will put themselves in the middle and place a wedge between you and your spouse.